Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Will My PPP Loan Be Forgiven? It's week 6 update. I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Schill, and I'm the Executive Director for the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce. This week, we're going to sort of dive right in. We are unable to have Glenn with us today, but we do have Steve McCarron from Community Bank, and we do thank him for being on with us this morning. This is a little Zoom 101. We will do our best to answer your questions today. So if you would just remain muted, and we'll use a chat function to ask your question. We don't get to it or we can't answer it, we'll do our best to find the answer. This is recorded, so you will be able to see this hopefully later today, if not, certainly by Monday. So, Steve, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, Brian. Glad to be here. So just to give everybody a quick update this week, for the most part, it was a quiet week from the SBA. Yesterday they came out with some good information, but I don't think really what everyone's looking for. We still, as banks, we still are waiting on the new forgiveness application. So the various calculations that will go with it. So we're just kind of all still waiting. But again, a couple of small tidbits that came out yesterday, in fact, that I think you'll find interesting. So one thing, and I alluded to this last week, is that the deferral period on these loans, which was originally 6 months. And when we say deferral period, what I'm referring to is basically no principal and interest payments. That was extended from 6 months out to 10 months. And the language in the rule that was recently published by the SBA went on to basically say that they're not expecting small business owners to start paying back their loan until forgiveness is determined by the SBA. So it looks like there's some greater flexibility there in when a small business owner actually has to start paying back their loan, should a portion not be forgiven. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. The second thing that I derived from yesterday's SBA announcement is that we had a couple questions about this last week, in fact, but it seems that a small business owner can elect to use their money over an 8-week period or a 24-week period, but nothing in between. You know, we had a couple people last week ask, well, what if I use my money in 12 weeks or 16 weeks? It just appears from the information we're receiving is that as a business owner, you select. It's either an 8-week utilization period or a 24-week utilization period, but nothing in between. The next big bullet point that we received is somewhat of a big one. Last week we had mentioned that, specifically I had mentioned that there was what we consider a cliff, which was basically if you don't spend 60% of the money on payroll, 60% or more on payroll, that your loan in general would not be forgiven. The Treasury Department and the SBA came out yesterday and said, nope, that's not true. They are still, the SBA and the Treasury Department clarified that they will still offer people partial forgiveness as long as they're using some of the money on payroll. Now, they were also clear in saying that you can't use more than 40% on non-payroll. So you can't use 80% of the money now on rent and 20% on payroll. I mean, you would still have 20% of forgiveness if you used it on payroll, but they really want you to use no more than 40% on payroll. And again, partial forgiveness will be offered. So that's certainly a good change from what we thought from last week. Also, another slight change and clarification they made is that you've probably seen where they extended the deadline to bring employees back from June 30th to December 30th. And what the SBA basically clarified for us is that a small business owner only needs to, use that extra 6-month period if they have not been able to bring back their employees all their employees on a full-time equivalent basis. So for example, if you said that you had 4 employees at the beginning of the year, but as of June 30th, maybe you only had 2 because the other 2 wouldn't come back for one reason or another, you have the ability to wait an extra 6 months to try to bring back or hire 2 additional employees. So that is somewhat of an added change. Now, on the flip side, if you had 4 employees at the beginning of the year, and then, by June 30th, you still had 4 employees, then by all means, you don't need to wait 6 more months. You can apply for forgiveness, now basically. And again, as long as you've utilized, the money during the 8 weeks you've had it. And then finally, and this is something that I had caught and brought up to the SBA, and certainly other folks who deal with this on a day in and day out basis had brought this next point up, which is that if you're an independent contractor or a sole proprietor, if you look at the way the SBA was doing their calculation, a lot of sole proprietors and contractors who made over $100,000, they were given a loan of roughly $20,833. But in the original forgiveness application, it said that as a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, you could not have paid yourself more than $15,385. So there was a $5,000 discrepancy there that was confusing some of the contractors. Well, the SBA came out and basically said, hey, look, if you're an independent contractor or a sole proprietorship, all you really need to do is take the full 24 weeks that we're going to give you, and you should be able to pay yourself the full loan amount and have you receive full forgiveness. So they did clarify that to an extent as well. So those were kind of my five big bullet points of the week. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions that the group might have.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
We currently don't have any questions at this point. Give everybody a couple seconds here to see if they have anything. If not, we'll just we'll call it for today, and then we'll go from there. So with respect to next week, we'll let you know to see what we're going to be doing next week, if we'll have Glenn with us or not, and then we'll put it all together. Okay, so here is one question. Do you have to wait to apply for forgiveness, or can you do it as soon as you spent it?
Yeah, a very, very good question, and that was again related to somewhat one of my bullet points, in that if you've spent your money during your 8-week utilization period, yes, you can apply for forgiveness. Right after your 8-week utilization period. So yes, you don't have to wait.
Thank you. If we choose the 24-week window to spend the loan proceeds, and we have restored our FTE numbers by that time, roughly October, does the FTE number at December 31st come into play at all?
Okay, very good question there, Jennifer. I would say, so it's one of those things where, yes, if you and that's a very good question. If you've used all your money on payroll, and I'll say this, some of this answer will relate to when the SBA releases their application to see how, if you have less, you've used all your money on payroll, but you've brought back less employees, depending on how that calculation is determined by the SBA will actually probably be the best answer to that question. I would say as of today, if you've spent all your money on payroll, but you don't have your full number of employees, I would say, run the analysis with your accountant and see what your forgiveness looks like. And then make that determination if it just makes sense to wait 6 more months to see if you can hire two people back. But yeah, I think the honest answer there is it's going to depend on what the new SBA application looks like. That's a very good question, Jennifer, no doubt.
Thanks, Steve. The next one is about the last bullet point means that as a sole proprietor, I can still draw or use $1,923 each week or $2,604.13. Yeah,
Chrissy, I see where those numbers are coming from. Right. I would say that, again, unless they're going to alter the application a little bit, it basically means that you basically still have to draw the 1923 each week, but then you'll end up having a loan. So you'll probably fully disperse your loan, let's say in 10 or 12 weeks. But then you'll have to wait that additional 12 weeks before you actually submit for forgiveness. That's how I'm interpreting it right now.
Okay. How does the 8-week/24-week period work? I won't spend the money in 8 weeks, but probably in 12. Do I have to wait for 24 weeks to apply for forgiveness?
Right, and that's the clarification that I seemed to get yesterday, which was right. It's either 8 weeks or 24 weeks, Kim, and it goes back to what Chrissy just asked to an extent, which is right. If you need if you only need 12 weeks or 14 weeks, the way that I'm interpreting what the SBA released yesterday is that, if you need somewhere in between the 8 and 24 weeks, then, you really just have to wait until that 24-week period ended. As we talked about last week, how the SBA interprets the law is always a little bit different, than I think sometimes what the lawmakers make out. And, we've seen a little bit of that over the last, 2.5 months. Now, yesterday when they released their additional information, I did get the sense, again, my sense was it was 8 weeks or 24 weeks, but nothing in between. So, hey, but the application could come out next week and we might have a whole different conversation, but that's how I'm reading the tea leaves right now.
All right. My 8 weeks are up in 2 weeks, and I had an employee pass away last Monday. So I'm sorry to hear that. Wow. Do I need to hire someone to replace him to receive forgiveness?
Keith, that's an excellent question. Honestly, I think the answer is I honestly need to wait to see the forgiveness application before I can really answer that accurately. My gut would tell me no. My gut would tell me no because he was on the payroll and you've been paying him. The only catch I could foresee on that is if for some reason the SBA is going to want us to analyze a payroll report. As far as number of employees. So if that is going to be a criteria of how forgiveness is calculated, then, the answer might be, to go out and hire somebody just so that your numbers, from, February 15th to June 30th match up. But that's a hard one to answer.
Will the banks be approving our forgiveness or the SBA? I spoke with someone in Senator Toomey's office who thought it was the banks.
So yeah, that's a good question. Look, and I've been saying this all along, and you know, the interim financial rule that was released yesterday basically said it's both. That's the answer, Kim. It's both. The bank the bank has and this is what's you know, for us banks, which is a little bit challenging, is that, you know, at first the banks have to approve the forgiveness. It's up to each individual bank. Again, unless the new application is going to tell us something differently, it's up to each individual bank how much documentation they get. And then at that point, once the bank has all the information, they will then basically turn to the SBA and say, hey, look, we think that 100% of this loan should be forgiven. 90% of this loan should be forgiven. 80%, whatever that percentage might be. And then the SBA will review the information that we have submitted to them, which, again, in all honesty, we don't know exactly what we're supposed to submit to the SBA. We know we're supposed to submit something, but we don't know what. And so whatever we end up submitting to the SBA, they will then review it and they will say, okay, we agree with this. And then we'll reimburse the bank this amount, which then of course your loan gets forgiven. So Kim, it is both the bank and the SBA, both.
Thank you, sir. Has there been any updates on the tax implications of the loan forgiveness for the IRS or PA?
You know what, that's a great question. I actually talked to one of my borrowers yesterday about this very subject. And you know, certainly I think an accountant might have a little better, you know, statement on this than I would, but I will tell you that there seems to be an ongoing behind the scenes battle between the SBA and the IRS. You know, one of the things that came out in the PPP Flexibility Act that was signed by President Trump last Friday is the fact that for a while now, small business owners were not able to capitalize on a tax credit that was being offered for payroll taxes. And that's what basically the IRS said. Well, I guess enough small business owners complained about that in the PPP Flexibility Act, they came out and said that, yes, a small business owner could apply for this tax credit that's associated with payroll taxes. And again, for me, just reading the tea leaves, I think that's just one example of the SBA and the IRS maybe not being on the same page here. But I would check with your CPA and see if they have any additional insight into, you know, what the tax implications are for getting this money.
Thank you. That's the last. Oh, here we go. All right. Has anyone asked about? I heard that the PPP has been extended. Has it, and is it an extension of anyone who already has the original PPP?
So yeah, the PPP Flexibility Act does apply to everyone that has a PPP loan, whether you just got approved for it on June 5th or whether you got it approved on April 10th. The PPP Flexibility Act does apply to everybody who has a PPP loan. That is correct.
Good. Anyone have any more questions out there? There's none on the chat. Steve, any other comments?
I have a question, Brian, and I couldn't type it quick enough. So can I just ask you, Steve?
Yeah.
We are trying to hire employees. We've gotten really busy right now. So in the meantime, you know, we're shorthanded. Another business owner is working for us. for a week or two. We put him on payroll. He also received a PPP loan. According to our CPA, he told us that we could put him on payroll and it could go towards our, our amount in using for the PPP. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, Kim. I do agree with that. If you've put him on payroll and you're paying him a salary, that absolutely could go toward your calculation. I would agree with your CPA completely on that.
Okay, even though he also received a PPP loan. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I think Kim, honestly, in his case, the onus falls on him. So the 2 or 3 weeks that you're paying him, he can't calculate, or he can't count that in any calculation that he's doing. But you can definitely count it because he's on your payroll. You've made him a W-2 employee. You have documentation of that. Yeah, I agree with your CPA. You're good. I think
Okay.
the owner that you've hired, he just needs to be a little careful with how he calculates forgiveness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. And then just quickly, I saw Dave added on. Would your bank inform you of that? I mean, and I guess I'm certainly in position to say this at this point, and I know a lot of you have been on every week. A lot of us bankers are a little shy right now to release information. Not because we don't want to, but I think for all of you that have been on this call for 6 weeks, you can see every week this information changes. I can remember 3 weeks ago when I told everybody, just read the forgiveness application, but don't fill it out yet. And that ended up to be great advice. And so that's what we're seeing. I think that my opinion is once the SBA releases the guidance for the new forgiveness application, and once, and hopefully with that, they give us some clarity on some of these issues that really all of you have brought up over the last 6 weeks. I think that you will start to see a lot more communication from the various banks that you have PPP loans with. So just keep spending your money on payroll, and we'll when we think we've got our arms around it, we'll communicate it.
Okay, we have another one here if you want to follow along, Stephen. Any updates from anyone that has paid out an employee for unused vacation while working? Per our handbook, it is allowed, but not sure if anyone has done this and wondering if that would be allowed. I'm hesitant to do anything odd because things keep changing, yes. My 8 weeks are up on June 30th, and I want to stick to that date and be done with all of this.
Well, I was going to say, if anyone, so I'm looking just real quickly. So in the interim financial rule that the SBA released yesterday, Chrissy, I'm gonna read this to you verbatim. It says the proceeds of a PPP loan are to be used for, and number 2, it says costs related to the continuation of group health care benefits during periods of paid sick, medical, or family leave and insurance premiums. So I'll read that again. Costs related to the continuation of group health care benefits during periods of paid sick, medical, or family leave and insurance premiums. So I would almost say, that's a tough. I mean, that's a hard one. I think, to your point, and of course how you ended your comment is, I think, how a lot of small business owners feel. You really just want to be done with this. So my thought would be is, again, if you're paying out an employee for unused vacation, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. if you want to say you're paying your employee a hazard bonus or a COVID-19 bonus, that is definitely allowed. And I think that would be a better way to handle it. Maybe just to, to basically just, I don't want to say reallocate it or restate it. I think that would be good. I think if you call it paying somebody for unused vacation time, I think that will raise more questions, which as you kind of allude to again at the end of your sentence there, you really don't want. So I think if you keep it as a COVID-19 bonus, as a hazard pay bonus, I would say that's the best way to approach it.
Okay. She has an added comment there. They already give a COVID bonus now in each paycheck. Any other name I can use to pay out the vacation? You could just call it a hazard pay. Instead of a COVID-19 bonus, just do hazard pay. Because obviously, I think the truth of the matter is that, a lot of folks that are working with the public right now and interfacing with the public, there's still a concern out there. There's still a possibility of risk. So I think if you call it a hazard pay, I think that would be acceptable, honestly. Cool. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your questions. Appreciate Steve being there for us. We will plan on next week, be June 19th at 10 a.m. And feel free to invite others if you think they would be interested in registering as well. If you need to call the chamber or contact us, best way is by email, info@ptcoc.org, or you can call our number, 724-941-6345. I see now we do have a couple more comments here. I thought bonuses were not counted.
That's incorrect. Bonuses are counted. The SBA actually has been very clear about that. You can pay bonuses, can be included. The big thing with bonuses is, and again, from the original application, the original forgiveness application, you just can't pay your employees more than $15,385 over the 2-month period. So, if you are paying an employee, $10,000 over those 8 weeks, and you want to give them an $8,000 bonus, that does not work. That does not work. But if you have an employee making $4,000 over an 8-week period, and you want to give them a $3,000 bonus, that completely works. So yes, bonuses are allowed as long as they're being used within the guidelines that the SBA has provided.
Good. Let's see, we have another question coming up here. How about Felicia? Would you like to come online to ask your question? We got your message.
I just think each time you present, Steve, it triggers other people to ask different questions, and the length of the questions take forever to type. So I'm always interested in what everybody else is asking, and I'm thankful for this as a resource, because otherwise we're, as business owners, doing all of our own research anyway. I understand your position being shy to share the information, but we're trying to figure it out week to week to make sure, like Chrissy, we're not making mistakes, or what is perceived as mistakes, but is standard operating procedure for us. So the caution that we're taking to not mess it up is something that's on everybody's mind every week. So not getting this information is the long and short of my comment. Is I'm thankful for this as a resource. So thank you for organizing it, and thank you for being forthright about what is clear and what is still unclear.
Yeah. You're
because
welcome.
each resource that you read is this is the news at the moment. So
thanks, Felicia. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I mean, look, I've worked with small business owners for almost 20 years. I mean, I know you all want the hard and fast rules. You want to know what rules to play by, what rules not to play by. I mean, I get it completely. And as bankers, we want to be able to give you, you know, the hard and fast rules that you need to play by. And you know, that's the challenge. That's been the whole challenge of the program is, you know, every week, you know, something changes. And so, yeah, we're doing the best we can, and certainly appreciate your comments.
All right.
Just
Yeah,
wanna
here's
say-
another one.
Hi, Steve. Haven't
Hey,
seen
Dave.
you for quite a while, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Here's a question. I'm an S corp and pay myself on a W-2. Am I considered an owner employee and cannot pay myself more in 2020 than in 2019?
So, okay. So this is, funny enough, we've been talking about this at the bank. An owner of an S corporation, it's a very tricky, difficult circumstance. This is one of the areas that we're hoping the SBA clarifies for us. And I've seen, you know, prominent tax attorneys in the United States talk about this. So in regards to Margaret's question, the good news is you pay yourself a W-2. So that's the good news. So that we know that, you know, we think you can be counted as an employee. Although I have seen some, you know, some debate about, you know, because especially this is why, you know, I'll be honest with you, you know, here at Community Bank, we weren't jumping to pass out the original forgiveness application, because on the top of page 7, it clearly stated that if you were an owner employee, you shouldn't be included in the calculation. And we were like, wow, that doesn't seem right. So, you know, depending on how you read that original forgiveness application, it really raises a question of, you know, of can you be included? We think that as somebody who's an owner of an S corporation that pays themselves a W-2, you should be included as an employee. So that's somewhat of the first answer. Now, as far as paying yourself more, that I think we need to wait for the application. I've seen places that have said that you should not pay yourself more. So whatever your weekly average was last year as an owner, you should not pay yourself more than that. But then I've seen other places that say, well, wait a minute. If you're an owner, and it goes back to some of the other questions we've had, if you're an owner and you're making, you know, $4,000 a month, or you're going to pay yourself, let's say $8,000 over the 8-week period, you should be able to pay yourself up to that $15,350 threshold that the SBA originally put out in the application. So I've seen that answered both ways. I think the best way to answer that for me today is we're going to have to wait to see for the application to see what the SBA's guidance is on this. But that is definitely a hot button for a lot of bankers. We want to know the answer to your question, Margaret, definitively. So it's a very good one.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give everybody a second or two. I have a question for you, Mr.
Sure.
McCarron. On the top left of your screen, there are 2 bowling pins there. What does that signify?
So the bowling pins signify Community Bank's participation in the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce annual bowl-a-thon. We had been a participant for 5 years in a row, and got awarded a pin for doing so.
And that other one, is that low score or high score? I wonder.
I actually believe it's low score. It was not by me though.
You left.
A
That's
colleague
right.
of mine, a colleague of mine won it, and she gave it to me, and I said, I'll display it, no problem.
Good question. Good. All right. Here we go. When I got my PPP loan, Citizens took out my W-2 income from 2019 and gave me the loan on my other employees.
So yeah, I would say that that was a pretty conservative approach. You know, to that. Here's the thing is, you know, when I'm looking at a you know, so I guess on one hand, if I'm doing a forgiveness calculation, if you didn't include your income on the front end, I'm not quite sure you can include it on the back end. I think that's how I would, yeah, if they took it out on the front, if they didn't include it on the front, I don't think they can include it on the back.
Okay. Good. All righty. I think we're done for now. So again, thanks everybody. We'll plan on next week. We'll get so go ahead and we'll get an email out to everybody today. And you wouldn't mind filling out the survey.
I'll be Columbo and ask one more thing. If actually it just went out. I made such a big deal out of the joke that I forgot what the question was. Oh no, is there any indication about the this extension PPP coming down in to the point where the banks will be saying, let's go to the people that we already gave the first one to, and can just kind of continue it, or will they close one? I mean, do you have any indication of the timing of it?
Yeah, so here's what I think will happen there, Dave. I think once we see the application, and it's what I suspect, and again, when I read the interim financial rule that the SBA released to the bankers yesterday, the implication I got is that a small business owner could elect either the 8-week utilization period or the 24-week utilization period, but nothing in between. And so if that was the case, you know, you'll get, you know, they'll forward you the loan application, the forgiveness application. And then, you know, that's when, you know, you'll be able to see what you can choose.
Ah, okay.
And that will release the information to you when that application comes out.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, we have a couple thank yous, and I want to reiterate that again, Steve. We appreciate it. I'm going to give it a little bit of a shout out to BUU4. Pamela Broadhead is our newest member, and we appreciate her coming on board as a result, basically, of these PPP webinars. So thanks, Pam, and we're glad to have you on board. So. Steve, thank you again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Like I mentioned, these will be recorded, or they are being recorded, and they will be online here hopefully shortly. And we will let everybody go. We hope to see you next week. Thank you very much.